But everybody, welcome to the BoomBastiCAST. We got a great guest for you this evening. We're just going to go straight up into it and just have it. You know what I mean? John Kassir, the Cryptkeeper. I do the worst impression of all time of the Cryptkeeper. I wish it was better. I'm more of a fan of his work, is what I'm going for. You know what I mean? Alexander Hawk, how about you? How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's great to have him on the show. I have to say that we all grew up watching Tales from the Crypt, and the Crypt Keeper is iconic, and
Yeah.
and it's also interesting. You know, you're looking at all his stuff. I mean, he has done a lot of voice acting. I mean, he played Miko the raccoon in Pocahontas 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Uh,
Classic.
He's done like World of Warcraft, Arkham Asylum, video games as additional characters. He's um he's done so much TV. He was in Problem Child, the
Yeah.
animated series, and a bunch of others. And it's always interesting when you meet different people and talk to
Yeah.
different people.
And we're
Uh,
about to talk to John in 2 seconds because he's with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, welcome to the show, John Kassir.
What's up, dudes?
What's
hey,
going down, John? How you doing?
Good.
It's an honor and a privilege to have you on the show.
You know, I wish I could say the same.
I know. Well, we're gonna change that.
ouch, ouch.
Dude, you set yourselves up. What can I say?
Well, that's what we do. It's good content. It's a beautiful thing. You know what
It's
I mean?
all good. It's all good.
Sorry, I was a little late. As soon as I tried to go onto Zoom, it started updating the app on my computer
Geez.
for some reason, and it took forever.
I
Anyway,
don't.
it's done. We're here.
No worries. Doing well. Zoom just upped to the buck too. Zoom's trouble. We're gonna have to get out of here. Bad news. But we're doing good. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. It's been a full week, full month, full year. I got a full day on a Sunday. Don't ask me how that happened, but it is. I don't know how to switch my. It keeps showing everything backwards.
Oh, mirror.
It says Salats Echdach Kirk instead of Tales from the Crypt.
That's ancient language, ancient scroll. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, now if you see that 3 times fast, all of a sudden the Crypt Keeper will take over your body, and
That's
then
true.
It's completely true. Yeah, 30 years, dude. 30 years. So let's begin.
So how'd you I know that you're kind of first oh, there he is.
Hello, kiddies.
I know your first embarkment into the world of you were always, as a kid, you were always a fan of, I'm guessing cartoons and comics and voices and such. And, you broke into it with stand up. Like you came into it at a time when like, doing the voices and stand up and just getting on a stage was kind of like the first foot in the door of getting into like that business, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of a little bit of a more complex story than that because I studied theater. I was a theater actor. I had my first real professional job. Well, I mean, I had some small professional jobs when I was starting out, even in college. But what I consider my first real professional job was an off-Broadway show in New York, and I moved to New York right out of college, and found myself in New York with no job after it closed after 3 weeks of inner fighting between the producers and the creative team. So, I made more money street performing in front of the Metropolitan Museum than I ever made doing theater in New York. And eventually I got a really big break on a show called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down, which I know it sounds like a gay review in the Village, but that's not what it was. It was a musical about stand-up comics. Think Dream Girls, but with stand-up comics
Okay.
kind of thing. And it starred myself along with Scott Bakula, and who we all know and love,
Yeah.
and Jerry Colker, who also wrote the piece. Jerry was an actor who had, actor, dancer, was in a chorus line on Broadway, and Pippin and a number of other shows. And his writing partner, Michael Rupert, who was a Tony Award-winning actor, wrote the music, and it was a hit off Broadway. And all of a sudden, everybody was like, "Dude, you played this really kind of dark, suicidal, Andy Kaufman-ish stand-up. It seems like you may be a stand-up." And I really, had done sketch comedy and out of Baltimore, where I grew up and went to school. We had a comedy group called Animal Crackers, which was kind of like their version of Second City. And so I had and obviously the street performing is kind of like a a guerrilla warfare version of stand up.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really done what you would worked as what you could call a stand up in clubs and that kind of thing. And I got approached by Star Search in its first season to come on, and they saw that me in the show, three guys in New York, and they said, "Hey, we want you to be on Star Search." And I was like, "What, as a singer? I'm in a musical, I can sing." But they had Sam Harris on the show, and he was killing it. And I was like, I go, "I can't sing like that guy." And they're like, "No, no, no, we want you to come on as a stand-up comic." And I'm like, I'm not really a stand-up comic. It's a part I'm playing in the show. They go, "Well, you can win $100,000. I'm like, "Fuck, have you seen my act?" I'll be in the club tomorrow, actually, working up my material.
Yeah.
So I went on the show. I was flying back and forth from New York to LA doing the show, and I kept winning. I had done, all kinds of fun stuff when I was a kid with my friend Fred. We used to do the morning announcements in high school and he'd roll me out on a dolly, and I'd be a 3-in-1 machine, kind of like I don't know if you guys might be young to remember Burns and Shriver, but they were, guys like that, these funny comedy teams.
Yeah. The teams.
Yeah. And, so I had done that kind of stuff. I started pulling out bits that I had, done since I was a kid, where I used to do like the Wizard of Oz in 10 minutes. Of course, they only gave you 2.5 minutes on Star Search. So I'd be doing the Wizard of Oz in 2.5 minutes. It's a twister. It's a twister. Dorothy, Dorothy, Annie M, let me in, let me in. As coroner, I must concur. I thoroughly examined her. What's them? What's them? That's the castle of the Wicked Witch. Oh, Dorothy's in that awful place. Oh, I hate to think of it in there. Fellas, we've got to get her out. I got a plan how to get in there, and you're gonna lead us. All right, I'll go in there for Dorothy. Wicked Witch or no Wicked Witch, gods or no gods is just one thing I want you fellas to do. What's that? Talk me out of it. So that was
Classic. How
So-
young were you when you started doing voices? Real quick, to jump in. Just gotta know, because it's one of those things you always hear. I was doing it since I was 6. I was doing it since I first could talk, type deal.
Oh, completely, since I could first talk. I mean, I imitated everything on the TV set. Of course, it was irritating to my family, but they had what, 3 channels back then when you were a kid. If maybe 2 of them worked. You'd be standing there with somebody, be like, moving the antenna, and go, "You got it." Wait, no, you went too far. No, you got it.
Yeah.
But I used to get up in the morning as a little kid and pull the knob off the TV set so my brothers and sisters couldn't change whatever channel I was watching.
Good tactic.
We had 5 kids in my family. If you didn't steal the knob, you didn't get to watch what you wanted to watch.
You gotta learn how to survive. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I used to, I wasn't, I mean, I was a smart kid. I had a lot of common sense as a kid, but I wasn't good in school. I was dyslexic. They didn't really know what that was. And, they just said I was lazy and disruptive. Of course I was disruptive. I was trying to participate in my own fun, entertaining way.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't really say that to the teacher. You're going to have to go to the office,
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But, once I found an outlet for that, I think I had like a third or fourth grade teacher that, after my second time in third grade,
Yeah.
who recognized that when I got in front of the class and read, I read better. But she would have me read poems in front of the class and stuff and take my test orally and that kind of thing. And that really, you know, that really gave me confidence to be actually think that I knew I could do that work.
Yeah. And then he got
So
out there and he did win that $100,000.
that's it. I kept coming back and winning, and I kept having to write new new bits because you couldn't repeat material until you got into the semifinals and the finals, and in the semifinals, I beat Rosie O'Donnell, who was just coming on the scene, who was obviously very talented,
Yeah.
um, and then in
Sinbad.
the finals I beat Sinbad,
Yeah.
who was making a name for himself as a stand-up comic. I mean, there was a lot of good stand-up comics on that. Because I mean, when they first approached me, I thought it was, like only for amateurs, but especially the stand-up thing was any stand-ups who had well established themselves in the clubs. I mean,
Mm.
they didn't have Evening at the Improv and those kind of shows yet. So unless you were on Letterman or uh, you know, Johnny Carson or Leno or any of those shows at that time, people in America didn't know who you were except from the clubs, in your area. So, and the next thing I know, I win $100,000, and I'm moving to LA, and I'm getting my first TV series on HBO, First and 10.
Yeah.
Playing a Bulgarian field goal kicker, Zagreb Shkenuski.
Yeah. Yeah.
And doing some other stuff for HBO. In fact, we were even trying to put together for me to do a stand-up special with Whoopi Goldberg producing,
That'd be cool.
and we never did get that together. I just, it was kind of like I resisted the stand-up thing, not because I didn't feel like I was good at it. I just felt like there was guys who were actually better at it. I mean, that
Yeah.
were like real stand-up comics that worked every day on their material and doing that kind of thing. And for me, it was more like I was bringing my one-man show to the stand-up stage,
Yeah.
and it was very effective in getting me sitcoms and this kind of thing. And then, of course, because I did a bunch of voices, I didn't really have any material, so I was doing all characters and voices in my act. I think I started to develop an act where basically I was a guy who was addicted to television, and I'd stand in front of the audience like I was at a Tubaholics meeting, you
Yeah.
know. And I couldn't, it's like sometimes I couldn't keep the lid on it, and the next thing I know, I'm like channeling Star Trek, or Wild Kingdom with all these different shows, and I could change channels on myself with a remote control. It actually was a very effective act, and eventually even wound up launching my own kid show on the USA Network. But working for HBO, they invited me down to, they knew I did all these voices and characters in my act, and said, "Oh, you'd be perfect to come audition for Tales from the Crypt." And I'm like, "What? I love those comic books as a kid."
Yeah.
I used to have to hide them from my parents. They were so, as you guys know, controversial.
Yeah.
What do you guys remember about the Tales from the Crypt comic books, or what do you know about them, basically? Did you guys have any, an idea of the background of those?
I mean, I get a slight, and I know of it, of course, because of the TV show. Big fan of the TV show. I've bought like a good amount of like the represses. You know what I mean? Just to have. They're nice to flip through. You know what I mean? It's a good vibe. But I've seen the like the mini docs on it and stuff like that. I don't have a, you
Yeah,
know,
there's a great, if you have the DVD box set, the first
yeah,
the first season of Tales from the Crypt on DVDs, they have a behind the screams
yeah,
DVD that goes on about the uh how the it went from comic book to movies to TV shows back to movies, and how controversial those comic books were. In fact, there are age codes on comic books because of those EC comics
yeah,
now. But they were like, "Oh, cause juvenile delinquency." I mean, it was as big as you know mad, moms against drunks. I mean, it was it
yeah,
was it was huge. They went, they were petitioning Congress to get rid of them. Of course, there were other people who are like, "Are you kidding me? Your kid's reading, for Christ's sake." It's like he won't read anything else, but he's learning to read. It may be fun, gross things, but the kid gets it. It's not like he's like become an interior designer and everybody's
Right.
house is going to look like a cave.
Yeah.
It's just like, come on, what is wrong with you people? So, luckily it survived. Well, it survived to a point because what Bill Gaines, who early on in our process I got to meet a number of times, was wonderful to work with. Um, was having such success with a lot of other things, including Mad Magazine, that they kind of let these comic books go to the wayside because I guess they didn't need the negative press anymore. But there's the show. Here it was being an opportunity to audition for it, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is just going to be for kids that grew up with the comic books like me. It's not going to be, HBO really wasn't in every household yet. It was,
Right.
you had to either steal the box or buy the cable or go see it at neighbors, kind of thing.
Yep.
And so I didn't think it would be such a big thing, but I was excited to go down to Kevin Yeager's studio, who had made Chucky and had designed
Right.
Freddy Krueger's look, and did all these, the creature maker and special effects artist, who is just at the top of his game, and has remained at the top of his game his entire career. And so I got to go into Kevin's studio, and I couldn't believe it. It was great. And there he was, making this guy, you're working on this puppet, and he had different versions of him. One of them had a nose, one of them didn't have a nose. I mean, he had, a bunch of different stuff he was working on. And I was like, oh, okay, I can see what he looks like, and I know what the show was supposed to be. And I could see, these other actors they had a casting director who was screening people first, to see if they had something that she thought Kevin would be interested in. And I could see them in the room going, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Oh, this is terrible. I'm sitting there going, nah, you don't get it. This is Shakespeare to this guy. I'm thinking to myself, and I remembered how great it was to watch Alfred Hitchcock introduce his episodes on Hitchcock Presents, and how dry and raised eyebrow he was, and I'm like, this is who this guy is, and because of his physicality and the holes in his throat, and I even threw in my Wicked Witch laugh. I mean, it's just like I was like, this guy's, you could do everything with this guy. It's not just the idea that he's a creepy host, but he could, he could imitate John Wayne. I mean, he could do whatever. So I was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to put all my own stand-up skills into the character. And as soon as I started doing it for Kevin, he was like, you could tell he had been sitting there all day, listening to the stuff that just wasn't working.
Yeah.
He just went, started going like, go, 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 go. He starts laughing. I start laughing. I'm like, oh, great. The Cryptkeeper laughs at his own jokes. And I just keep doing it for him. Next day he had me doing it for Joel Silver and Dick Donner, two of the biggest guys in the business, in their office. Well, actually, it was in like a trailer, off the set where they were working on Tales from the Crypt on on what was a small budget for a regular TV series, but coming from HBO at that time.
It's big. It's big. It has a very cinematic, big feel to it. The show does. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they put all the money into the production. Nobody really got paid what they should have got paid, but they had great people because I mean, they had access to whoever they wanted. As big producers as they were. And the producers on the show were Joel Silver, Richard Donner, Walter Hill, Bob Zemeckis, and David Giler, who was, who produced Alien.
Yeah.
Of course, who Walter Hill is a big director, producer, Dreamscape and 48 Hours. And I mean, Warriors. Come out to play. I actually got to do a show off Broadway with David Patrick Kelly, called The Glorious Ones at Lincoln Center, and we had an amazing time. What a talent that guy is!
Yeah.
But he's so good at the creepiest characters. But He's a trip. He's a real talent,
Yeah.
um, musician and actor. But uh, it's there they were being able to get the actors to come. Actors who were like never got to do comedy that were serious actors wanted to come on, and then there was you know, I mean, the genre started taking off, and it was HBO, and people were like, "Oh, Joel, can I direct?" It was like, "Yeah," and next thing you know, Michael Keaton's directing, and Michael J. Fox, and Tom Hanks, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and
Yep.
you know, some of these other effects guys Paul Abascal directed the episode that I was in, Oils Well That Ends Well, that starred in as my visual self,
Yeah.
um, and who was a big, who is a big, effects and makeup artist, and wanted the opportunity to direct. He did a great job. So it was, a playground for a bunch of people. They had great cinematographers. They had great, you know, and then Gil Adler came on the scene, who had been producing Freddy's Nightmares, and
Mm.
as the showrunner, and we hit it off immediately. We're still very close friends. In fact, I think we're supposed to have dinner tonight with he and his
Oh
wife.
yeah.
And Gil, of course, produced the movie Superman, and you know um, Valkyrie, and I mean, great producer, and as well as directed and wrote many of the episodes, and along with Alan Katz, um, A.L. Katz, his one of his writing partners, who created a bunch. I mean, wrote a bunch of stuff for the show, including a lot of the fun stuff for the Cryptkeeper. Um, and we had a guy named Jack Wall, who I loved. Jack was kind of like, your old uncle. He's like, hey, Booby, where you're gonna be doing Bud Light commercials as the Crypt Keeper, and we got a toy coming out, and blah 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 blah. He's no longer with us. Sadly, he was some of the best involved with this show are no longer with us. Dick Donner's gone,
Yeah.
sadly, um, and Jack, but Jack. I mean, I think that he'd probably still be cooking up stuff for the Crypt Keeper to do if he was around. He just loved it, never stopped. Um, even after the years after the show was on the air, we didn't even have the rights for the show anymore. I mean, to do more stuff, but he was always trying to get him back and trying to do something with it, and that kind of thing. It was a great experience for me. It also launched my voiceover career, which obviously was a natural fit for me. But at the same time, getting the opportunity to be known as a voice actor, and getting the opportunity back then to get work as a voice actor, or to get representation as a voice actor, wasn't easy. But as soon as I got that part, I got the best agent in the business. They were the ICM voiceover department at that time. Now they're called DPN, and have been for many years.
Yeah.
Um, and they've I'm still with them after all these years. I've never had a different voiceover agent, because they're just the best. And we've had, you're talking about 19. That would have been like 1989, 1990, just after the show came on the air, that I started with them, and I've been with them ever since. And we've done so many amazing things, and continue to do so many amazing things. I mean, I'm very lucky. I worked very hard at this, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
when I said I was in New York street performing to survive, that was 5, 6 years I did that. That wasn't just like a couple of months. It was just like
Yeah.
I did a long time, and I stuck with it, and you know, paid whatever rent, my measly rent I could, living in a shithole in New York, to survive. And it's people think it gets easy. It's like, oh, you're one job away. Yeah, you're one job away from getting another job, but you're not necessarily one job away from having a career that continues. And certainly voiceover work, because has continued for me, because I'm not typed out by how I look. I mean, I got to play a lot of parts on screen, some really fun parts, and actually good departures from who I am. But then I played the original Deadpool when he first came out in
Oh yeah.
games, before he was in any movies, or he certainly was in the comic books, and when they wanted to bring him to life, they thought of me because he talks to the camera and he was snarky and fun and, quoting all these memes and stuff like that. They go, "Oh, let's get the Cryptkeeper guy to do it," but they were never gonna, they're never gonna, hire me to play him on screen. Welcome to the gun show, but
Oh no, I don't know. Maybe Ryan Reynolds wants to take a day off.
yeah, right, sure.
Just done.
I love Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool.
Yeah.
I mean, when when we first started doing it, I was like, okay, I've read these comic books. The guy's really irreverent, I mean, they're like, yeah, we want him to be that, but we can't do the language and stuff. Kids will be playing the game and stuff like that. I was disappointed because I was like, this guy can be a lot edgier, And of course, that's the way they went with it with the movies, which I love. It's really well done.
The Cryptkeeper was very edgy and rock and roll in its own right. The thing you said about
completely
HBO and how you didn't know how big it was going to be. Like I popped in, I didn't catch it when I was on HBO. I caught it when I went to Fox on Saturday nights, and I assumed that at that point when it made that switch, well, they were still doing HBO shows, but they were on Fox as well and cleaned up, edited, right?
Yeah.
That's how it went, I think.
Yeah, they had to cut them. Well, I mean, they had to cut them down too for to fit into the
slot.
TV format with commercials and that kind of stuff too. So, but definitely for language and content, there was a lot of people have come to me over the years. I mean, first of all, we never knew kids were watching this show. I swore to my producers, kids are watching the show. They're like, nah, there's no way. First of all, do they have access to HBO at all? No, the kids can't be watching this show. Well, I've grown to find out, going to conventions and meeting people over the years and with social media and talking to people, I've grown to find out there were more kids watching it than our original adult audience. Yeah. And a lot of that was on Fox. They first saw it on Fox. And then when the DVDs came out and they realized how much edgier the show was than the versions they had seen, then they really loved it, But when it was first on HBO, I mean, I had so many people come to me, they're adults now and they were kids at the time. They're like, I'm like, I guess it sounds like this was your gateway drug to horror.
Yeah,
which, I say as a joke, and that's the reaction I get. I don't get a laugh. They go, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was. For me, how could you go by the TV set without hearing that voice and seeing that puppet and, knowing that this was the character that made something scary, something that gave you nightmares, fun. Yeah. So, I mean, they actually latched onto the character as their buddy, and as there's women who go, oh, he was my parents used to tease me that he was my boyfriend, or people carried the doll around and said this was my baby, and this kind of thing. And you never thought of the Cryptkeeper as that, but he was cute. I mean, I like to think that was part of the personality that we were able to bring to the character to make him fun and funny, but that's really part of the way not only he wound up, but also was designed to work. He was supposed to be the character that makes you know this is supposed to be fun. Yeah. It's very tongue-in-cheek, if I had a cheek left.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the Cryptkeeper is, I mean, like you said, it was kind of like a gateway drug to horror for a lot of young fans because it's, I mean, even though they did water it down a bit, like on Fox and all of that, you still, I mean, the kids knew that it was the thing that they weren't supposed to watch. And when they watch it, they just it's kind of like tiptoeing on the edge. And the great thing about the Cryptkeeper is because he does look odd, he does look a little creepy, but with your voice, with your puns and all of that, I mean, honestly, kind of made him like the fun uncle. Okay, the fun uncle that's like, hey kiddo, how about you come over here? I got some magazines to show you, to make you a real man.
Yeah. Here's some brains. This is your brain on drugs. This is your brain on Tales from the Crypt. And so that was the idea, and it was very successful that way. They worked really hard to bring the comic book to life. I mean, they even used some of the pages of the comic books as storyboards for how they were
Yes,
going to
I like
shoot the
that.
show. Um, I mean, this crypt that they built was, a real set, but a lot of the stuff that they had to build was like, you know, fake Spanish moss in the foreground. Made it
Yeah,
look like you were in Louisiana when you weren't. I mean, things like that. I mean, they had to be creative, but that's what sometimes makes something really special and timeless too. I mean, you go back and watch Night of the Living Dead, and there's people carrying like butcher stuff from the butcher shop in their hands, and they put a sound effects to it, and the little girl with the trowel and the sound, and all those practical effects still stand up. And then you go watch something that has some kind of CGI to it, and it just doesn't stand up anymore because it keeps getting better and better and better and better. I mean, it's like it's obsolete by the time the movie comes out. But so practical effects are an amazing thing to bring to life. I think there's so many people that I've met along the way that I go, what do you do for a living? They go, oh, I went to school at Tom Savini's school, and I learned practical effects, and that's what I want to do, and blah 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 blah. And I was like, that's so cool. I mean, because it's something that still dies on and lives on. And the show was really well done. I mean, I could name you 10 shows that I did over the years that you would either not even remember or not even ever have heard of. And we had high hopes for those. Some of them had some of the best actors in the business in them. Some of them had the best writers and show creators. And I worked with people like Alan Burns, who created Mary Tyler Moore and Lou Grant and all these great big hits on television. And his first job was writing for Rocky and Bullwinkle. I mean, and the show didn't, for one reason or another, didn't get its due because it either didn't get a good time slot or was too highbrow, whatever.
yeah,
And so you throw all this shit against the wall to see what sticks, and of course, you never know what people are even going to know or remember you from, if anything at all. And but of course, those big shows and stuff paid me, you know, the big dollars that helped, you know, buy a house and have a regular life, and save money for a pension, and have a real life as an actor. But would I have liked some of the, Three Guys Naked was the show that not only made my career, but it also used more of my talents in that one show than any other thing that I've ever done my entire career. There was nothing that ever showed off, what I could do in terms of being a comedian and an actor and a singer and somebody who was funny but also tragic, and all in one show. And but you know how many people saw it? If the house was sold out, 499 seats in the theater in an off-Broadway house or whatever it is, 500 seats, that's how many people saw it a night for, less than a year that the show ran. So, I go on, I do one, a leave commercial, and that plays on Jeopardy every day, and
yeah,
5 million people, 5-10 million people see me every day. It's just a different kind of thing. So you don't, people assume your career is what they see you doing. And yeah, I've been really lucky to string it out, over many, many years, playing parts that were much more famous than I'll ever be, which is
yeah,
great. I mean, that's to me, that's the fun of it. That to me, that was, I did my job right. If people remember my characters, wasn't, you think it's going to be about you. You start getting a career and you're like, oh, I want to be famous. And why I want to be famous? Because I want lots of money. A.
yeah,
B, I want like everybody to offer me the best stuff that you can do, which, you want to make opportunity for yourself. And, but I feel really lucky to have made huge opportunities for many, many, many years, for 43 years now, uh, surviving as you know, as an actor,
yeah,
um, exclusively as an actor for 43 years.
Yeah, you've
Um,
got a good career. It's good to have those juicy things like Cryptkeeper. That the Cryptkeeper is forever, like forever.
oh,
And
totally.
what's beautiful about the Cryptkeeper is that you've the fans love you as the Cryptkeeper. So like you're in a place like Kane Hodder, where like if they tried to take you out of that position, I know they were trying to do a reboot a couple years ago with M. Night Shyamalan. Were you like did you get attached to that, or did it even get to that stage? Or
No, no, because I mean, we years ago they let go of the rights. The people that I produced the show, they weren't going to keep putting out the money if it wasn't going to be on the air.
yeah,
And then when they went to get the rights back, EC Comics, the family, William Gaines' family, had handed over to some um, legal team or something, whether they wanted money or they wanted to do something different with it. But, nobody wanted to see it without our Crypt Keeper, and we're the only ones that could use that Crypt Keeper because that
right,
was our version of the Crypt Keeper. But at the same time, we can't pitch him as the Crypt Keeper and do new things with him as the Crypt Keeper without the rights to Tales from the Crypt. He could go get parts as another actor on some other show. He could have his own talk show, call himself the creepy dude. Ah, thank you for sitting down with the creepy dude. you know, and that was Jack Wall, my buddy who was always coming up for the Crypt Keeper stuff. He was always like, "We're gonna do something. It's gonna be called Stories Your Mother Never Told You. Blah 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 blah. We're gonna have the Crypt Keeper. He's gonna call him the creepy dude and stuff like that. But you know, but really they'd be really, I don't want to call them stupid because they're not stupid, but I would call them remiss if they didn't use that Crypt Keeper, and that's what people want to see because it honored the comic book.
yeah,
It brought the comic book to life. And these other ideas that they wanted to do with the show didn't bring the comic book to life. They wanted to do like the same like an American Horror Story where it's the same cast throughout different stories and stuff like
right,
that. And I was like, that's not Tales from the Crypt. I'm sorry. You're just borrowing the franchise that's already been established by somebody else and using the name. And when it came down to it, they didn't have that Crypt Keeper. That was a big, you know, okay, well, then we're not going to do it kind of thing.
mm,
And, and our guys, of course, didn't have the rights. So they would have liked to have the rights back to do their own thing. So they weren't going to just hand over the Crypt Keeper to him, you know, that's, it doesn't work that way. But, it's too bad. I mean, the good news is there's 93 episodes of Tales from the Crypt. There's three movies, which are really fun. I mean, Demon Knight is still,
love
people
it.
come to me and say Demon Knight is like in their top five horror movies ever. It's definitely in mine, and not just because I was in it. It just is. It's so well written. It's so well
Yeah,
directed. Ernest Dickerson did such a great job. He cast it amazingly. It has one of the best casts you'll ever see in any horror property, for
yeah,
sure. The music is great. It's got an amazing soundtrack. Um, and the effects and everything hold up too on that. I mean, they did amazing effects and animation. And the story is timeless. So, and it's funny too. There's
I
so
love it.
much there's so much funny stuff. When she has like, when um she has no arm and she's like, he goes, "What are you doing?" "I'm giving you the finger." It's like,
Give me the finger, asshole. Yeah,
so
I love it, dude. First movie I ever bought for myself ever.
really,
Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. Yeah, I
that's
went to
great.
there was a little gas station rental store at the top of my street that had it for used for sale. And I was a kid. I saved up my pennies, and when I finally had the money, I went up there and got it and brought it home. I was so excited.
That's
Love,
great.
love that movie.
So you
Still
can
has
buy
it
that
today.
stuff. Go ahead, Alex. I'm sorry.
Still has it today.
I
I'll
do. Yeah, of
That's
course.
amazing. I mean, that you couldn't get movies that way when I was a kid. I would flip through I mean, we didn't even get the TV guide. I'd have to flip through the newspaper version of the TV guide trying to find out what was going to be on that week. In Baltimore, we had something called Twilight Movie, and it came on, I don't know, 4 or 5 p.m. or something when my mom would be making dinner. and I'd sit down and they'd have everything from a Doris Day movie to Mothra. You know, all those movies were big then, you know, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. And
Yeah,
then they had all the Roger Corman stuff, House of Wax and Tingler and all those movies. But of course, then they also had the Universal Horror Monster movies,
yeah,
which were my favorite. And I collected all those Aurora models,
yes,
you know, the Frankenstein, and you know there was a five and dime or a drugstore down the block from when we went to church. So I would save up my, like, you know, shekels, as you were saying, my a dollar. It was a dollar. I think the model was a dollar, and the, you know, and the tax was a penny. So I had to have a dollar one or something,
yeah,
which ironically I think is what they sold a bottle of Boone's Farm for when I was in high school. But when I was a little kid, you know, I'd go down there, and if I had a dollar from an auntie or something like that, and my penny, I'd walk in there and I'd buy the next, you know, Aurora Universal Horror Monster model and build Frankenstein or Dracula or the. In fact, I still have. My brother actually built this one. Was the guillotine? You know, it actually cuts off the head of the guy. You know, but you know, so I there was no streaming, there was no videos, there was no DVDs, there was no way for me to watch this stuff. I mean, I'm sure you could probably pay money and order funny movies like Three Stooges or something like that on little Super 8 or
yeah.
little reels or something, and watch them on your projector. But I don't even know if they would have had sound unless you had a really nice projector. But you know, that's how it was. So, but and I loved that stuff, and that's why I think the comic book was great, because I that's something I, you know, I used to have to hide them from my mom. I wasn't supposed to have those. I had these
Yeah.
Casper comics that, like, a friend of my sister's had given me a box of Casper comics. I was like, I'm not interested in Casper comics, and it had Archie comics and shit in it. And I was like, you know, which are great comics, but they just weren't my cup of tea. But I would
Yeah.
hide my Tales from the Crypt in them. I'd take the cover off of them, and you know, so I could be reading, and my mom would
Yeah.
be like, "What are you reading? Archie? Okay, you know, Casper, you know, Casper, the friendly ghost, you know." Meanwhile, I'm sitting there reading Tales from the Crypt comic books, you know,
Hell
250
yeah.
Tales. But
I
you
I
know,
remember those Aurora model kits way before my time. I would have collected them. I always heard Gilbert Godfrey talk about them, and I know you guys worked together in the Problem Child animated show, the cartoon. You get any stories of working with Gilbert? I assume a lot of the same voice actors and comedians, stand up world, maybe a crossover. You know, you guys met each other
you know,
outside.
oh well, yeah, I definitely met Gilbert.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there were other comics that were very close with Gilbert. I didn't know him well enough to be close with him, but we worked together on animation and Problem Child, you know, which had just all kinds of great people in it.
yeah,
But Charlie Adler, and you know, I mean, just really, you know, I think E.G. Daly was in that, and some really, really fun people over the years. I mean, I got to work with some great actors in animation over the years. Yeah, everybody from, you know, William Shatner to Mr. T, you
yeah,
know, who showed up on, and you know, in the Savage Steve Holland stuff like Eat the Cat and the Terrible Thunder Lizards. You know, they were, oh, this week we have the Barbie twins in, and you know, or whatever. But Gilbert was, you know, I remember when I first, you know, after they said you're going to be on Star Search, I was like, oh shit, I got to get myself into the club. So I went and showed up at Catch a Rising Star. And I had opened with my comedy group in Baltimore for Richard Belzer. And he had always said to me, he goes, you should be doing stand up. If you ever show up at the stand up club, he goes, just mention my name, or, you know, I'll get you on, whatever. And I showed up there, and there was no reason why they would have put me on, except Richard Belzer happened to be there. And he was like, put that kid on. And I went on, and I followed Gilbert Gottfried. It was the first time that I saw him in a club. And back then, Gilbert was like really, you know, he'd be doing his act, and you know, he would do half his act with his back, with looking at the wall, you know, his back
yeah,
to the audience. And the comics would be sitting in the back laughing their ass off. And the audience was just like, why are they laughing so hard? This isn't funny. You know, but then he'd turn around and he'd have like a bunch of napkins. He goes, listen, you know, I want you to call somebody. This is going to be, he's my doctor. I'm going to have him call you. And then he goes, he did some bit about people with, he goes, there's people with a single name, and they you know, and they were banished to some world with the people with single names. And then and then they met up with people with the pretentious middle initial, and then there was the people with three names, like Michael J. Fox, and and then share, started with it, and it was just I just was like giggling my ass off on the floor, and all of a sudden they're like, "You're on," and I had to jump up there after you laugh, and I was like, "Oh my god, that was so funny," and because I had so much fun watching Gilbert, that it just made me giddy for my act, and it gave me, I mean, that was my first time at Catch a Rising Star in New York, working on a stage that had, the best comics, ever.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, I was always a fan of Gilbert's. His real brilliance was watching him as a stand-up. Everything else he did was, because of that voice, or because he was just a quirky, interesting character. But when you're that specific, and there was a number of comics that were like that back
Mm.
then, whether it was Bobcat Goldthwait or
Yeah.
Emo Phillips or even Sam Kinison. you know, I remember walking into the Comedy Store, and I didn't play in LA, and I didn't really play that as much as the Improv. I just had a better relationship with the people who ran the Improv, so it was easier for me to just walk in there. And it was an industry hangout too. So you get off stage and you sit at the table with writers and producers and other actors and whoever just got finished shooting their episode of Moonlight. Bruce Willis would walk in after shooting an episode of Moonlight. And so it was an industry hangout. That's why I liked the Improv. But the Comedy Store was, a comedy club, comedy club. Everybody knew it. If you were there and you played there enough, you got your name written on the wall, and, they even may have put your picture up. And, I the couple of times I'd play there, it was like I'd be on with other weird comedians like Jim Carrey, who was, doing his act double jointed, where he'd like do the entire act with bent at the waist backwards. I'd be like, oh my god, this guy would be awesome on acid. And but I remember walking in one night, and they had like an entire audience. Well, not an entire audience. They had like a lot of the audience was a bus of people, Black Baptists, and Sam Kinison was there, and he was like, put me on, Mitzi, put me on," and he had, he was an evangelist back in the day, so he had like this robe. He put on this robe, and he got up on stage, and he started doing the most blasphemous act he could do. I mean, these people went from laughing their asses off to leaving crying, horrified. And the comedians were I was just like, oh my fucking God. How are they letting him do this? But he was beloved by the community world, and Mitzi Shore, who ran the club,
Yeah.
of course, wasn't going to stop him. But it was unbelievable. I mean, he probably started out with that old joke where he like rips one hand off and rips one hand off, off the crossing of, "Whoa," and he started from there. He goes, "Oh, poor Jesus," blah, blah, and it's like, I just couldn't believe it. And these people, literally, he had them crying, because they were all religious. They got on their bus and left. And I was just like, oh my God, I go like, my stand up is nothing. My stand up is pop culture. This is frigging, you know, this is
My
going to church. This is going to church through hell. I mean, that's what that was. Um, so, I mean, those were some interesting years, but truly one of my favorite things to do as a stand-up comic was have the right to sit in the back and watch all the other stand-ups work. I never had to pay. I never had to pay to sit in the audience at a stand-up club ever in my life, which was amazing. I really, really loved it.
Yeah, to be a fly on the wall, with some of the stand-ups back then, if you could have time machine, take vacations and time machines, these
Not
are
only,
places you'd go, you know what I mean?
oh yeah, not only that, you'd see somebody, and I'm not going to name names because there's some of them hugely successful, but you see people on stage and you go, this guy is so like milk toast. He's not fun. He's not. I mean, the audience is enjoying him. Yeah, he's funny. He's not that good on stage. He looks like a shop teacher. He's just, what is that? And the next thing you know, the guy's got his own show that lasts for 12 years on TV.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I'm not doing something right. I'm not putting myself out there as to, I stopped doing stand up because I didn't have enough of myself in it. I wasn't, there wasn't me in the act. It was me playing all these different things and being funny and certainly entertaining to the audience. But
Yeah.
and obviously it took me very far in terms of getting parts on one sitcom after another and that kind of thing. I made a lot of money doing it, but I didn't really enjoy doing the road, so I,
Yeah.
avoided that. But
Well,
when I first won Star Search, they were booking me opening for like the Temptations and the Four Tops on their TNT tour and Lou Rawls. I was playing for like 5,000 people at a time, which was more my style because I had come from the theater.
mm,
Playing a club, I mean, I didn't really have like heckler comebacks yet. I didn't have a rounded out act that worked in the club, and that was really fun to do, to start working that stuff out. Um, so it wound up being great. But to watch somebody who came out every night, it's like, oh my God, that stand up has, Jerry Seinfeld. Oh, look, he's got a legal pad with new jokes on it. Okay, so his first 10 minutes of his act, he's going to work on his new jokes, and then he's going to do his thing. And then, next thing you know, he's putting all that together and he's killing it. And then you realize what he's doing. He's putting together his next set for the Johnny Carson show.
yeah.
So those guys are, I mean, I had a lot of respect for those guys. One of my, truly, my favorite, I don't know, you guys ever watch comedians in cars getting
Oh
coffee?
yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry show, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's
Great show.
truly my truly my favorite interview show ever.
Yeah.
I mean, really is. I love it, and I wish it was still on. I'd have my agent go after it and get on there. Talk
Yeah.
about horror and comedy and how that all works together. In fact, I did a podcast with Paul Provenza. That was an old friend who. Trying to remember the name of the podcast. I'm really sorry, Paul. I can't. I'm not remembering it right off the bat. Old brain.
It happens. I
Um,
can find it.
but that's what we did. We talked a lot about the correlation between, especially Tales from the Crypt, because of the comedy within that, and how horror tied into comedy in so many different ways. I mean, my favorite horror comedy is still Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
Oh,
It still is. I love that movie as a kid. I remember watching that movie, and there's a scene where they have, Dracula has come to America from Transylvania or whatever, and Frankenstein. Oh, I don't remember how he wound up with Frankenstein or whatever, but Frankenstein is in a crate with like packing material, and I'm like, Mom, you can order Frankenstein. I'm like, oh my God, look at him. He was shipped. I was like, I want Frankenstein. Of course, I start looking through the comic books and I find in the back you can order Frankenstein. So I order Frankenstein. Of course, it's a 6-foot flat cutout of Frankenstein, which sat in the corner of my room. Literally, I'd wake up in the morning and be closer to the bed, and I know it was my brother, but I would swear in the dark, it looked like it was getting closer to my bed all the time. But I'll never forget that. It was just, something amazing. Boris
Good.
Karloff. Yeah.
John, we know you didn't have a whole bunch of time. We thank you for being on the show.
Oh, please. I really enjoyed it. You guys are awesome. I did, if there's anything else you wanted to explore before we get off. I know
Well,
I did a lot of talking, but you asked good questions that sparked a lot of memories. So.
Oh, thank you. Alex, what do you think? You got one?
well, I mean, actually, I wanted to ask you about the Three Stooges TV movie where
Something close and dear to my heart.
that you played Sham Howard. Yeah, I really thought that was a really good film. I mean, usually a lot of people like it down, talk down to like made for TV movies, but I think it's definitely one of the better ones, and I definitely enjoyed your performance and everyone involved in that.
Oh, thanks. They really wanted to capture, their life. It was the material that it was based on was the only authorized biography ever written um, about the Stooges. And of course, Mel Gibson was involved because he loved the Stooges. I mean, he used to do, even in the Lethal Weapon movies, he'd do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, we young kids, especially young boys, grew up with with the Three Stooges, and I always loved the Stooges. I always loved Curly. He was the most childlike, so we all loved him as a kid. But I loved Chimp because he was so talented. He did so many different things that the other Stooges didn't do.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I want to be a part of this so badly. I had such good producers on it, and the director was great, and you know, uh, Jim Frawley, who was an actor on Broadway, he became a director and did like the Muppet movie and stuff like that. I mean, which was, you go, a Muppet? How did he wind up doing it? Muppet movie is brilliant. I mean, those kind of movies, to make inanimate things funny on camera along with real people and stuff like that, is not easy to do. People think this like, oh, it was all cartoons. It was like, that's the hard shit. But we had an amazing time. But when I went to audition for it originally, I had all that hair as a young man. I had all that, curly hair. So they thought of me to come in and audition for Larry. So I come into audition for them, and they like my audition. They bring me to the producers, and in the middle of it, the producers are like, shit, you know what? You're a good Larry, but we have Larry choices. We have some good Larry choices. We can't find our Shemp. We think you'd make a great Shemp. Will you prepare that and come back? And I was like, yeah. So I went and got like, you know, some stringy wig that I put on backwards hanging in my face, or I wore a cap or whatever. I don't remember exactly. And I came in and I did my Shemp. And, of course I knew that they wanted to tell the real story. So I was like, they don't want to see an impersonation of Shemp. They want to see me capture the essence of this character. And you could tell by the script that he was a very neurotic and unusual guy, you know, um, obsessive compulsive and all these things that, that added to his brilliance as a performer, and which informed me not only how to perform the comedy, but also how to, bring him to life in the story. And it was such a good script. And so, of course, they hired me. And, the rest of the cast was awesome. I had worked with Paul Ben Victor before, who played Mo. Evan Handler and I had a lot of mutual friends, but you know, he, but I got to know him pretty well. And of course, Michael Chiklis was awesome. He and I were playing golf the whole time we were in Australia shooting it. So they were going to shoot it in Australia. They literally flew us to Australia the day after the millennium kicked off from Australia. I don't know if you remember, but they shot fireworks off from the bridge because that's where like the first place that time zone that turned, 2000. And they did this huge thing, and they were going to be doing the Olympics there that spring. And so their January, February, March, when we were there, is their warmest, most beautiful time of the year. So we were flown to Australia, put up, like, literally, I looked out my hotel window and there was the opera house, the Sydney Opera House. And so we got put up in an awesome place. The four of us. The rest of the people they got from New Zealand and Australia to play Americans. The coastline still looked like Malibu back in the day before it was built, and they had all these old theaters. They had an old Warner Brothers studio. I mean, a Fox studio that we could use to play the old 20th Century Fox studios and all this stuff. And we had the most amazing time shooting that, out of, many of the different things. I think the only thing they ever had more fun doing was Reefer Madness. And that was because of the material and the people that I got to work with on that show.
Yeah.
In fact, I just talked to Steven Weber yesterday. It was his birthday. I called him to wish him a happy birthday. We had an amazing time working on that in Vancouver. So yeah, definitely. And while we were shooting it, the network was loving the material so much, they went to Mel and the producers, and they went, Neil Marin and Craig Zaden, who were the producers, and they went, should we release this as a feature film? This is really good. This is not like your typical television movie. And Mel and the producer were like, no, you know why? Because we're making this specifically for TV. We could extend the material and bring more things into it and that kind of thing. But we didn't hire we did not hire people because they were stars. We hired them because they were right for the parts. We hired them, all these different things. And, so like if we release it as a movie, it may come and go, but as a TV movie, millions and millions of people are going to see it on Monday night on ABC. Everybody watches those movies. Back then they did, and everybody will see it. So let's just stick with this, and that's what we did. But thank you for saying so, Alex. In terms of its quality, it really was a wonderful film. You can still see it. I think it's listed as like maybe on YouTube or maybe it's probably now on some of the other streaming services. But I think they called it like Three Stooges 2000 because we shot it in 2000 or something. But it really well done, really well done.
Yeah, I really loved it. I thought, I mean, going with what you said, that honestly, when I was watching it, I was like, this itself could have been a feature film in theaters and all that. That's how well done it is.
For sure.
And
And plus, we had access to home movies of the Three Stooges. We had access to their whatever family members were still alive. Joe Mora and other people. You know, so that we had the opportunity to really try to fill out these characters with what they really lived. It was a good script. We had an amazing time doing it. I'll never forget it, shooting it for sure. Hey, thank you guys. Hope it's a great year for you. Thank you for enjoying me, and be careful what you ask for. You may get it.
And that was John Kassir, the great John Kassir, man of many talents. You know what I mean? That really great dude gave us a good chunk of time, which I love. I always love chunks of time, baby. And I think we did win him over by the end of the episode. You know what I mean? When he gave us that deals. I was waiting to see you and him go crazy about some Abbott and Costello. I know how much my boy gets down with some
I
AB.
mean, I was tempted, but I knew time was short, and I wanted to get in about the Three Stooges because I thought that was um, because I mean, don't get me wrong, love the Cryptkeeper and all of his voiceover, but since he doesn't do a lot of physical, be on screen himself, and I
Yeah.
thought it was one of the best things that I saw, that I really wanted to talk to him about it, wanted to learn more about it because I really loved that movie. That was really well done, and I really loved his performance in it.
He's fantastic. I was gonna, if we had a little more time, I was gonna bring up the fact that there's all the cool stuff, merch, side projects they have. Like I happen to have like Bordello of Blood, like director's chair from like the promotional deal. But I don't know if you ever heard it. I have the CD. It's Tales from the Crypt Christmas,
Hmm.
which it's a Christmas album. I was curious. I think we might be able to get him on again in the future. But I was wondering if he got any with his comedic background, if he got to do a little writing on it, because that's the comedy. Have yourself a scary little Christmas. And they do the Christmas rap too, Cryptkeeper rap, which is devastating. John Kassir, great dude. Alexander Hulk directed this one, brought him in, reeled him in. Very cool dude. Would love to have him on the show again, dive into some deeper things. And yeah, man, what do you think?
I enjoyed it, and it was great. I mean, he had a lot of great stories, and just talking about you know uh, his startup, the people he's worked with, and and of course the whole genesis of the Tales from the Crypt,
Yeah.
the TV series, and all the things that came from it. And of course, I think one thing that's great about his story, which is the case if you sit down and think about a lot of the people we talk to, is that there's no definite way. I mean, I know when I started doing this, and I know a lot of other people who started doing this, you want to go up and you want to ask, so how do I get in the business? Do I get an agent? Do I get and the fact is, honestly, those who make it in the industry, there's um no definite way. It is, everyone ends up getting to where they have to be by different means. I mean,
Right.
he didn't think of being a stand up, but he ended up being a stand up. And he started, creating his characters, and then, that branched out to something else. And he now, I mean, we didn't go through it, but he has a litany of voiceover work on video games, on animation, and he's constantly working and constantly, doing such great stuff that people will always, think of him as the Crypt Keeper, but he's so much more because he's done so much more. And I think that's one of the things we try to do in our interviews and on the show of BoomBastiCAST is to, peel behind the curtain and see more of these people and find out and learn more about them. How they became where they are, what they've decided, or they want to go on one path and then they ended up going on another. And sometimes you have them that they're doing two different things that you don't even know about as, kind of side things. It's always interesting following the people down the rabbit hole and see where it leads.
I mean, the slight burden, I think, of doing voice acting work is the fact that your face isn't there for you to get recognition. You know what I mean? Because you go as far, but in the early years, he was did a little bit of Moonlight, was on Moonlighting, was on The Facts of Life. You know what I mean? A bunch of television shows, you know what I mean? Killing it, dude. Really good, talented dude. The types of people we like to have on the BoomBastiCast. You know what I mean?
But then again, you can also look at another thing as voice acting actually being a huge benefit if you want to keep on doing the characters and the stories, but you don't want to be like bogged down by paparazzi and that kind of stuff.
For sure.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, you got like Dabney Coleman, you got Matt Frewer, Dwight Schultz, a lot of actors that started doing TV and movies and stuff that you see them mainly popping up in voice acting work now, which they keep on busy, keep on making money and getting themselves out there. So it's always interesting when you think you can see someone that you say, oh, that he's a great actor, and then you don't see him for like years, and then you look at the IMDb, and that's because they ended up doing voices for TV or movies or so forth and so on. So if there's someone that you think is great but you haven't seen for a while, they might be doing voice acting work because that is definitely a whole place of a lot of talented people. I mean, you got those who can do one voice very well and they use it in all their characters. Then you have people who can do a million different voices,
Right.
which is always amazing.
I'm waiting to see Alexander Hawk do some more voices.
I only got one voice, only one voice, and that's me.
Not what I heard. It's not what I heard. But oil's well that ends well is all I have to say about this episode. It was good times. That's a good episode of Tales too. Lou Diamond Phillips probably doing one of his best performances of all time in that. Priscilla Presley, if I remember correctly, was in it. Very beautiful. You know what I mean? Fantastic. But our boy, I was so happy. Good interview. Very nice to have him on. It was cool. Cool stuff. And yeah, if you like this episode, go like some more episodes of the BoomBastiCAST. If you like making the BoomBastiCAST happy, go join the Patreon page and make the BoomBastiCAST very happy. There might even be, I can speculate because of the John Kassir interview, but I can speculate that as you listen to this, look around, there are new strictly for BoomBastiCAST fan perks, tiers on the Boombastic streaming page. So yes, if you like BoomBastiCAST, there's some special stuff just for you to link into on the Patreon today as we breathe, live and breathe. You know what I mean? I want to say rest in peace to Gilbert Gottfried. I want to say rest in peace to Richard Belzer, who seemed like he was pretty influential in a little bit of John's stand-up, beginnings, which is good.
And
yeah,
to jump off of that, I just want to say that in this, as he talked about Belcher helping him out and giving, his words of encouragement, getting him on the stage. For those like us who are doing film, whether it's directing, acting, and all that, that is the most important gift you can give anybody. Okay.
Mm.
I know that I've worked with people that like to think of this as solely as a competition. I'm there to beat out you for this role and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think that's a big hindrance because I not everyone's going to get the role. And unfortunately, when you think about it, it's going to end up being, usually someone who has a connection to it. But if you help each other and build each other up, you
Yeah.
both win. Okay. And when you both win, that's a beautiful thing.
Rest in peace, Tom Sizemore. I just seen a thing on the Facebook. It said famous friends say goodbye to Tom Sizemore, 61 years old. I clicked on it. It was a tweet from Alexander Hawk talking about how great Tom Sizemore was. And I get emotional when I see that. Tom Sizemore's a good dude.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately didn't get to actually meet him or work with him one on one, but I was involved in two films that he was involved in, and I always had mad respect for Tom Sizemore.
Much love. Him and Natural Born Killers is untouchable. Just for what he's done in Natural Born Killers alone, I always give him kudos. But there's a lot of great flicks under his belt, and rest in peace. You know what I mean? I never met him or worked with him in any way, but I did enjoy his films. So rest in peace, and thanks for the entertainment. Thanks for the entertainment, Tom. But with that being said, I think it's time to wrap this bad boy up.
Heck yeah.
Packaged up all nice, and we go back to Heidi Fleiss. Tom, this one's for you. And we'll catch everybody else on the next episode of the BoomBastic